White privilege is certainly one of the more interesting concepts. You can find news articles and blog posts and social media crap all about white privilege. Now, if you're old enough, you might not be hip to this white privilege thing. I only got a little bit of white privilege talk in school, but it's been in colleges for quite a while now, and it has really trickled down. Kids are getting this kind of stuff in high school, middle school, and maybe even some elementary schools. I was actually looking over some news articles and I saw this one on Quillette. Now, this article is against white privilege, which is not something you'll commonly see on CNN or MSNBC. I really like the image they chose. It's an image of a woman holding a sign saying, quote, "I am white and privileged." And she's kind of holding it up against her chest. It kind of reminds me of the dog shaming memes, where you hang a sign on your dog telling the world about its crimes, its bad behavior, like stealing food or biting people. And I'm pretty sure that's what all of this is about. Shaming white people for their crime. The crime of existing while white. Now, the term white privilege, it's been around for a while, at least since like the 1960s and the 70s, but it was never really that big. It was kind of fringe. In 1987, Peggy McIntosh wrote The Invisible Knapsack. Now, this is a knapsack of privileges that white people just walk around with. The idea became quite popular. If you have kids in high school, ask them if they know about the invisible knapsack. They'll probably tell you yes. They've been thoroughly educated about how they carry around an entire sort of tool chest of wonders and how shameful it is, ultimately. Maybe they haven't heard it, but maybe that's just a they haven't heard it yet sort of thing. Next year, they'll come back and tell you, oh yeah, well, I'm beginning my invisible knapsack education, right? Now, back in 2003, the American Mosaic Project, which is part of the University of Minnesota, was attempting to track how many people believed in white privilege, just over half of white people and the vast majority of Black and Hispanics. Google is well known as a combater of white privilege. You've seen many headlines like this: Google is tired of so many white and Asian men. You know, we're just too privileged, too many knapsacks. They don't have enough room in their building for all those invisible knapsacks, so they got to give someone else a leg up. Now let's take a look at Peggy McIntosh's knapsack. Now, this is a critical document. It's central to the education of children on the concept of white privilege in many areas, and it's also critical to the history of the concept of white privilege. I'm not going to go over the whole thing. The whole list is actually 50 points long. I'm just going to take a look at a few of these, and I want to remind you, it's because of this idea, this knapsack that we have that others don't. This is why companies like Google feel they should discriminate against whites. This knapsack is part of the reason your elected officials, both Democrats and Republicans, have made no attempt to end affirmative action. After all, if they should get affirmative action if we're going to have this big, great knapsack, right? Let's take a look in this knapsack. Number 1, I can, if I wish, arrange to be in the company of people of my race most of the time. And at number 6, I can turn on the television or open the front page of the paper and see people of my race widely represented. Now, this is a very interesting privilege. You know, she's saying here that people like to be amongst their own, which is generally what we find. People just naturally gravitate to be towards their own. If you don't teach kids that privilege is a wonderful thing, when you go to their cafeterias, if they haven't been correctly educated, they'll just go sit with their own race, right? And if you go to somewhere where, the sort of social norms of society have broken down a little bit and people no longer care about being politically correct, then things split very hard along racial lines again. Just look at any prison cafeteria, right? I mean, the normal social norms of society have gone away, so no reason to be polite anymore. People immediately just segregate along race lines. So it's very interesting. She's saying, hey, people like to be amongst their own. Well, maybe it's time for some separation so everyone can have that in their invisible knapsack, don't you think? Number 2, I can avoid spending time with people who I was trained to mistrust and who have learned to mistrust my kind or me. All right, come on. It's not training. The media will even tell you about how babies are racist. This is a matter of biology. This Newsweek cover is over a decade old. We all know that babies see race and have a preference for their own. And if anyone learns to mistrust you, she says mistrust my kind or me. If someone learns to mistrust you as a person, well, that's your own problem, right? Be more trustworthy. This knapsack, so far we've done 3 of them out of the 50, and they're going really great so far. Number 4, I can be pretty sure that my neighbors in such a location will be neutral or pleasant to me. And number 5, I can go shopping alone most of the time, pretty well assured that I will not be followed or harassed. Well, number 5, we know from crime statistics, white women are significantly more targeted than non-white women, so I don't know what that one's about. But ultimately, hey, if you want your neighbors to be nice to you, you got to move to a place where you have nice neighbors, where people themselves are nice, right? Nice people act in a way that's consistent with who they are. But tell you what, I'm not going to get too deep into it. Why don't you watch my video on white flight? There are reasons some areas are just so nice and safe. It's sometimes hard to tell if you're not looking for it. There's a reason you can go shopping alone in certain areas and not be harassed. So check out that video. Number 7, when I am told about our national heritage or about civilization, I am shown that people of my color made it what it is. And number 8, I can be sure that my children will be given curricular materials that testify to the existence of their race. Now, white children today are certainly told about the existence of their race. That being said, white children in white countries are often told that their race are perpetrators of all evil. We're portrayed as a destructive force that attempted to sweep the world clean of all that is wonderful and nice and brown. They're not told about how the British Empire may have been one of the single largest human forces in ending slavery around the world, right? Over 200 years ago, the British Empire attempted to blockade Africa, attempting to completely shut down the Atlantic slave trade. But instead of white British kids being told that their forefathers were part of the single biggest anti-slavery movements around the world, they're told that they're evil for being white. Instead, British children, they look like this. Or like this little kid with his father. Now, this is truly a disgusting man, not standing up for his son to teach him the real history. But once again, a lot of this is about non-whites voluntarily giving up their knapsacks, isn't it? I mean, if I were to move to China and I were to have a white family there, I had white kids, if I were to send my white kids to a Chinese school and they'd be taught about, of course, the national heritage of China, which would show them a bunch of Chinese people that built the country, right? While some white people may have had some minor roles, they would be shown the major players, especially because we don't have an infinite time for education. So it would be about me giving up my knapsack when I moved to China. I'd be giving up my own children's knapsack, right? So why are all these non-whites more interested in living in white countries than having their own knapsacks, right? And is this knapsack really all it's cracked up to be? If people would rather give up their knapsack than not live with white people? I mean, functionally, if someone's choosing to do something, if they're saying, well, I'm going to leave my black area where I have a knapsack, where my kids will talk about a heritage that involves them, if I move to a white area, I'm giving up their knapsack. Well, somewhere this person has to believe that they're making a trade up, right? They're trading up by getting rid of their knapsacks. So should I really feel bad that my kids might have a knapsack and theirs won't? Number 9, if I want to, I can be pretty sure of finding a publisher for this piece on white privilege. Yes, publishers have been willing to publish anti-white propaganda for a long time now. Now, go write something that is anti-black or anti-Jew, and see what those same publishers are willing to do. Or don't even write anything anti-anyone, right? Don't write anti-anyone. Just write something that is nice about white people, something pro-white. Some of those same publishers that are willing to publish your anti-white stuff might suddenly cut you off if you're giving them something that is pro-white, even if it's not anti-anyone. See how that goes for you. Number 12, I can go into a music shop and count on finding the music of my race represented, into a supermarket and finding the staple foods that fit with my cultural traditions, into a hairdresser shop and find someone who can cut my hair. Oh, come on, this is just the same thing as before. Once again, people are giving up their knapsacks because it's so fantastic to live around whites, right? I mean, that's what it has to be. Otherwise, why are they doing it? Why are they giving up all the food that fits their culture traditions, going and finding people, having all this trouble with their hair, not finding their traditional music? I mean, they're giving that up. They're doing this on purpose. People aren't leaving certain countries and moving around the world by accident. You didn't trip and end up in the United States. Number 21, I am never asked to speak for all the people of my racial group. Meanwhile, in the modern day, there are tons of questions for white people videos, and we are more and more expected to speak for our race, and we're judged on our race. And this article that she's writing is just part of it. We are questioned about our knapsack and, how we're bad people for carrying it around. Oh, man. Number 22, I can take a job with an affirmative action employer without having coworkers on the job suspect that I got it because of race. Now, this is a really interesting one, right? She's saying there that there's a policy of affirmative action. Affirmative action basically takes jobs from the hands of white people and gives them to non-whites, right? Now, if you're a sort of pro-affirmative action person, you're an affirmative action supporter, you wouldn't phrase affirmative action that way, but that's what it does, right? The idea is that these other groups don't have enough jobs, and we should make sure to create additional opportunities for them by making employers hire more of them. But employers are only going to hire so many people, right? So it has to come out of the hands of white people to go to these people, right? It's a transfer of jobs from whites to non-whites, right? If it didn't make any real transfers, if it did not successfully take any jobs out of the hands of white people, affirmative action would do nothing, right? So she's talking about this privilege where jobs are taken from white people and given to non-white people. And she's doing a triple backflip here, saying, no, this is actually a privilege for the white people. See, white people are privileged because even though there are jobs taken from us, right? After that happens, no one suspects us of having received a handout. Now that's wonderful. Wow, you can take something from someone and then say, no, you're privileged because you didn't get the handout. The person who got the handout, they're the disprivileged one. Even though they got something from you, now you can secretly suspect them of having received handouts, and that's the real disprivilege, right? Now, I should get up. I should take political office, right? I should propose that we take things away from everyone and give them to whites. And then when everyone stands up and protests, I'll just tell them exactly what she's telling us. I'll say, hey, this is going to be your great privilege. No one will be able to accuse you of taking a handout because after all those awful whites will be the ones receiving those handouts. You'll be able to suspect all your white neighbors and, cast a suspicion of doubt on them. Now, this is a gold medal for mental gymnastics. Number 15, I do not have to educate my children to be aware of systemic racism for their own daily physical protection. Now, actually, every white does need to educate their children on the situations that we as whites face. They'll be told that they're guilty for being born. They'll be educated by teachers who love Peggy's work and who hate themselves. Our children are going to increasingly face times where they are less secure and less physically safe, which is why we must educate our children to be aware of the exact racial context that we live in today.